Welcome everyone. I'm Owen Bondurant. Welcome to our webinar tips when selling your pharmacy to family members or employees. This is our monthly webinar. We do one every month on a number of different topics. We typically try to do them on the third Thursday of every month. Um, this is being recorded, so if you want to go back and listen to something, we will record it and we'll email it out. We'll put it on our website, put it on social media. Uh, During the webinar, if you have questions, there's a Q&A at the bottom. Feel free to drop questions in there. We'll answer them as we go or at the end, depending on if it fits into what we're talking about. As I stated, I'm Owen Bondurant. I'm a partner here at Independent RX. Um, my background is kind of in pharmacy all my life. Tim and I own here two pharmacies here in Dayton, Ohio. And then we have Independent RX, which Independent RX helps people start and buy pharmacies. We do accounting for a couple hundred pharmacies, and then we also sell pharmacies, which is why we are here today. I'll let Tim introduce himself.
Hey, good afternoon, Owen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Tim Clark, pharmacist like many of you, worked in the business since I was a kid. Um, have owned about 30 pharmacies in the last 25 years, mostly with Owen's dad, Mark. And over the last few years, we've really focused on our consulting business where we help people, as he said, buy, sell, starts, and do ongoing accounting and tax and data analytics for pharmacies. I think we're both kind of, interested in the business aspect of the pharmacy. It's a ever changing field and it's pretty interesting. Um, a lot of times as you get into it, a lot of people tell you not to because there's so much change, but I think the change is a great thing. It kind of motivates you to do better and to look and spend time in your business. And if you continue to change and evolve, you'll create some profitability, which will lead you to today's discussion of, hopefully you got something good to sell.
Yeah.
That's what all of our hope is after the end of the day is to have a good job, good business, and then hopefully, sell it. Some of us are trying to sell it for a lot of money. Some of us are just trying to pass it on. So I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned something there that, a lot of people will tell you not to. I believe you bought your pharmacies initially off of your dad, and he told you not to be a pharmacist, I believe.
Well, it actually wasn't my dad. It was my one of my managers,
Oh yeah, that's
Larry
right.
Larry Close told me I was stupid to go to pharmacy school, is what he told me. He didn't
Yeah,
tell
that's
me
right.
it was stupid to own a pharmacy. It was just stupid to go to pharmacy school. That was right back when it used to be when I was working in pharmacy to start with. We didn't have even a computer. We were handwriting on charts and we were literally not even billing on a computer. We were filling out these triplicate forms to send into an insurance company to pay us, which that just started the avalanche of someone decided what I was worth, which pharmacists throughout history have never been great at charging what they're worth, but that kind of solidified that we were into became more of a volume business. I think is what happened during that is like to really make it, you had to have enough volume. And today that's kind of not true as much because I think a lot of us have seen like if you got the wrong volume, it's terrible. So not only has that changed the we continue to change the dynamics of actually how we get paid and really what we want to do. Like for instance, Owen and I, we own a compounding pharmacy, long-term care pharmacy, primarily because they make margin.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still reimbursed fairly for what we do on the outsides, as you know, with the wrong mix in a retail environment, you know, it used to be that it was really simple. We'd look at your volume and say, okay, that's what you were worth, and it would be across the board fairly similar. But now it's all based upon your mix of business.
Yeah. So
or
today,
your insurance provider. I mean, different insurance providers, if you got too much of one, that can tank your business too, or make it very profitable.
yeah, yeah. So today we're going to talk about, selling your pharmacy to either family members or family member or employees. Both Tim and I have purchased um, pharmacies off of our families. So we have
We
both
did.
personally done this. And I know for me, I mean, it was fairly simple. Um, but so we do have experience in doing this ourselves, at least being on the buy side of this. Um, and for some of us, like Tim said at the beginning, some of us are trying to sell it to, cash out and have a retirement or, get money that you can pass down to family members or whatever it is that you do. Others, want to make some money, but also want to continue on that legacy of that business. Or it could be a hybrid. Um, the reasons, Tim, I mean, what are people thinking when it comes to selling to their family and like why they might want to do that? Um,
Well, like all of us, you feel good. I mean, I'm
yeah,
sure like my parents felt good that the business transitioned to yet another generation. Um, but there's always this, it's hard to figure out what is the fair price when you're like, let's say in my instance, what was fair? I mean, the business really couldn't have continued the way it was unless I stood up and wanted to be a buyer. Because there was no one else in my family that was in the business. My
yeah,
dad, had an illness and wasn't able to work anymore. So I was kind of thrust into, being responsible for everything. So different circumstances can also create that you got to buy it or you got to sell it. When you
yep,
and,
that's
and,
true.
and in your family, I would kind of say that, when you sell to your family, they're not going to get the highest price, but they're also not going to get the lowest price.
Yep,
The only way you could agree to a lower price is if the family member really has banked enough of their own money that they don't need this as part of their retirement vehicle. Most people that I talk to, this is part of the retirement vehicle with along as they might have an IRA, a 401k that they've started stashing money in, as they've gone, but this is typically part of the retirement plan.
yeah. And you mentioned something there um, about your situation. You were probably the person who just knew the business best at that time. So I think a lot of times we think, well, hey, this employee or this family member has to be the buyer because they're the only one who knows how to operate my business, which may or may not be true. Um, uh, and that's how that ends up kind of becoming the conversation is, oh, I've got this pharmacy and, my son or this employee's been running it for the past 5 years. They should buy it. Um, But I think what we've got to understand is sometimes they don't want to buy it or they're not interested in being an entrepreneur. Sometimes they are, but just because they've been operating and know the business doesn't mean that they're necessarily the person to buy the business.
And a lot of those things change as our let's say our personal situation
Mm,
changes. The guy or the girl that's, let's say, not married or not in a relationship has a different way of looking at it than someone who's about to get married or married. I mean, we have other factors outside of our own family that kind of go into, do we really want to live in Dayton, Ohio the rest of our life? I mean, I chose to, but I got a bunch of kids, and all of them so far have decided I don't want to live here when I grow up. They live in nice places like Denver and Irvine, California, Chicago, Illinois. I mean, Raleigh, North Carolina, places that are more interesting, I guess. Dayton, while it's interesting, is kind of like you know, it's suburb. That's what Dayton is. It's like a very comfortable, way of life. It's not really a big city like maybe Cincinnati or such, but that person who in your family who could buy it, the thing you got to recognize is things change in their life too that could make them think today that I'm going to buy it, but that could change. Like as soon as you're ready to retire and you don't have anything on paper, Owen could say, "Hey, I don't want to live in Dayton. We're gonna, you and your family are going to move back to Chicago. Yeah, I could think that you're going to buy me out, but you may, you know, be saying, a few years from now, my kids are, your kids, for instance, very talented. They could be living in a big city.
Yep.
You and your wife may say, we're going to follow them.
Yeah, you don't know. And I mean, interestingly, you say that we've seen both clients and employees who, are single, then they get married, then they have kids, and they've gone from, I want to buy this to, you know what? Now that I have kids and stuff, I don't want to have that much time eaten up. Conversely, I went from living in a city, getting married, having kids, and then I said, you know what? I need to get back into owning businesses so that I can free up time and be more flexible. So, you do have to start understanding, the people you're looking at buying, you need to have, continuous conversations with them to make sure that you're on the same page about what their goals are and what your goals are in terms of um, this whole situation. Um, yeah. And along those lines, we actually just had a question that's kind of goes into what we were going to talk about next anyway. So the question was, can you speak to the financial advantages and disadvantage of selling to your family?
The addition, well, as always, the disadvantage is emotions. I mean, the disadvantage is that we love these people, and whether that we have a great relationship that we're let's say a tight family, even if you're not a tight family, you still love these people, and we make some decisions that aren't great business decisions, that are emotional, right? So the thing that's difficult in those family dynamics is that you really do have to um, again, in my opinion, you should at least get some sort of valuation for your business no matter what, because that'll help you in terms of expectations, whether selling something too high or too low, or at least again having someone who's not a family member discuss the value of my business. It's I think a great exercise. I did a valuation for a client this year who actually wasn't planning on selling the pharmacy to the family. They had some other businesses, and they were trying to figure out how did the pharmacy fit into her legacy, or her estate planning, right? So she needed a value for the pharmacy business to try to make sure she was being fair to the other family members. Which is the other thing that happens that you get. Well, I've worked with some sisters that are in business together that bought their business from their family, and that's also complicated. Because you got one sister who's ready to retire and the other one who's still got kids, and I got to pay for college. So we're all at these different stages of our life cycle. But for you, the owner, your job isn't to do anything but try to set a fair value that your family could pay without it being too emotional.
And I would say one of the other disadvantages we've seen is I don't think people always know what the options are for actually financing the businesses. So we get a lot of people come to us and go, well, I want to sell to my family, but I got to do a seller note and they're going to pay me over 10 years. That's not enough for me to get my retirement. And they don't
Or they also
realize,
become worried, but they also become worried, Owen, that I'm going to go give them a seller note, but then I'm still going to have the same worries that I have today.
right, because I need to coach them along for the next 10 years to make sure I get my money and that they're successful. Um, but there are options to get these businesses financed, especially if you, as Tim said, value them appropriately, where it doesn't burden your buyer or your family member or employee, but you also can get your money or the majority of your money up front. There's actually banks out there that specialize in pharmacy, know the business. And if your business is making money and is valued properly, well, then you might be able to get all or 90% of your business money up front. And it might be a good path for all parties. But I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, I mean, I guess I'll have to do a note with them, and that's my only option, which also can turn into an advantage because you can separate the taxes over 10 years. Um, so one of the advantage is financially is if you're in good communication and have a good relationship with your employee or family, you could structure it in a way that is advantageous to you from a tax perspective, and could allow you to earn some interest over time. Um, but that requires that communication and for both parties to really talk about how they're going to go about it. Uh, and I think one other disadvantage, and this doesn't always happen, but you get a valuation, but if you never explore other buyers, you don't know how much money you could get. Um, and what we mean by that is sometimes there's a strategic buyer that will overpay for your business. So we're seeing it a lot in compounding right now. There's a lot of compounding pharmacies being, purchased for big multiples, um, and it makes sense to the buyer because they have a strategic way of adding business to it, and it's too expensive for them to build the pharmacy and build it up themselves. Um, so, this used to happen a lot with chains. They would overpay for pharmacies in order to buy the script files. So if you don't put it out there and never try, you never know if someone could have overpaid you for it. Um, but that also has to be your goal is to max out financially, which again may not be someone's goal.
Oh, well, I guess my advice on that going forward, Owen, is that, those discussions are really good for you to have with, the professionals that work for you, like your accountants and your attorneys,
Yes.
because their whole focus is not taking care of Billy and Sally. It's taking care of you, their client, and they can kind of tell you some things that, um, you might not tell yourself, or your family might not tell you, that really have, even us, like, some people engage with us to do that. And our job is to be objective.
Hmm.
I'm trying to give you unbiased viewpoint, because I'm not emotionally tied to it. I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm trying to put together the numbers with the scenario and your circumstance, and then the business. And then you're also trying to look into the future of what is pharmacy now and what could it be. So there's so many different variables. But if you can, like, if you've got somebody in your family who could do that, you know and it's, let's say, within the next 3 years that you want to do something, you probably need to start figuring some stuff out now while you've got that as an option. Finding out evaluation, even discovering, is it worth more to somebody else? Would I sell it to somebody else and I wouldn't sell it to my kid? I mean, you kind of seem like a jerk if you're going to do that, but I tell you, you're not doing your family any favors by not taking care of your business while you still own it. And if that means that you yourself are going to get a more return selling it to somebody else, then that's better for your family.
Yeah. And I mean, we've had this, right? I mean, if uh like my dad and I have a good relationship, so like before I bought out his shares, if someone had come to them and said, "Hey, we're going to offer this for the business," and it was just outrageous, I would have been like, "Well, looks like you need to sell it, and I'll figure something else out," but not everyone understands that. And also, like your employee or family member may not know your entire financial situation or all your things, so they can't even give you that advice like your accountant and lawyer can.
Right.
So it's not that they're, doing something wrong. It's just, accountants and lawyers, their job is to, you know, ask these questions you know, that other people aren't asking. I mean, it's our job as well. Yeah.
But in terms of you bring up financing that acquisition in a family member or friend or employee. I mean, they can get access to money. They can get SBA loans. They can actually get a loan from a bank. Um, like you said, it could be a combination of that. Maybe there's also a seller note within it. Maybe there's real estate that we're just going to pay for rent over time. There's lots of ways to create a plan, to get that happening instead of talking about it. What I find a lot of people do is they either start too early or too late in this process.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do, but they're really not ready to sell. Then why are you bugging me? Like, why are you bringing this up there? Because then it's almost like you keep moving the goalposts on your family of buying it.
Yeah. And then
Oh,
I
I'm
start
looking to
getting
sell,
mad.
or that they can't
I
make a
get
decision for them
frustrated. Yeah.
for themselves though. And I mean, like they might say, if I know I'm not going to be able to buy this in the next couple of years, that I need to move to Chicago so I can do what else I wanted to do. They also have more options than just buying your business.
Yep. And that starts creating frustration because they start making plans and then they don't happen and then it drags on and then it doesn't happen and they're holding off on other things in order to do that. And it becomes frustration, and that's when you start, like, if you're selling to a key employee, you might lose that key employee because they're,
Right.
you know what, I'm ready to move on. Um, so there is a bit of a fine line, and I will say we can understand from the seller's perspective, why you're not ready to retire because you've probably been doing this for 40 years, and what the heck are you going to do next? I mean, again, I'll bring up my dad again, but like he knew when he was going to retire, and it still took him 2 years to really kind of get into retirement and he had lots of hobbies. And yet, when you're not working 50 hours a week, like it's hard to play that much golf. And so, like, you got to find something to do. And so you're kind of nervous about the whole selling. So you end up dragging your employee on, and then that employee leaves. Now you don't have a successor. So, you do have to do some planning here and then execute that plan.
Okay, but there are let's and you kind of briefly talked about this, Ellen, but okay, there are advantages of selling to your family member, right?
Hmm.
Like there's advantages of the emotional feel good about it. I mean the advantages that you're not going to, I guess I'm hoping you're not going to take advantage of what you think they can pay or what the business makes. You're hopefully going to be remembering that you know unlike you selling it, let's say to me, somebody you don't know, selling to somebody you do know and you're going to have Thanksgiving dinner with. I mean, you definitely got to be, forthcoming of everything about the business.
Yeah.
The now there's again, but there's also again problems with selling to people in the family because maybe they know too much,
Yep. Yeah.
or they don't have any money. Um,
Well, and there's a good one because that's something that we see often. Oh, I'm going to sell it to this employee. And one of our first questions always is, well, do they have enough money to buy it? And they always go, well, I pay them $150,000 a year. They better have enough money.
mhm.
Don't assume that they do because a lot of times they don't. And it may
Yeah.
not be because they're, managing money poorly, but they may have had a large student debt. They may have had to buy a house because now they have kids, and they've used up all their cash and don't have the money to buy it and can't even make the down payment that is required to do it, like with a bank or what have you. So, like you need to share your financial information, your family member or employee is going to have to share theirs as well, because you need to know that this person can actually buy it before you go waste a year trying to figure out how to make it work.
And actually the way to get around that is again, like is to try to do some sort of loan.
Yes.
because
Yes.
because now it's because now it's not me personally having to go check up on Owen and make sure he's got enough money. It's Bob the banker is checking on it so that I can have a third party, say, oh well, he can afford to make this or he can't. Which again, that objectivity we lose with friends, family members, people we know. Um, I think I told you this story when you do involve, let's say, your attorney on something. The first advice they'll always give you is to um well, first, the biggest one is like never have a partner. And they're
Coming
not,
from partners.
yeah, I was gonna say, and they're partners in a legal practice, so it's
Yeah.
so funny. But they tell you not to have a partner, which can be true, or they'll tell you don't be a minority partner, because the problem with being a minority partner is you really don't got a lot of power to sell it or to buy it. So there's when you're dealing with, let's say, junior partners or family
Yeah, I was
members
about to
getting
say.
into it, like my whole thing is like you got to understand both sides of the equation so that you know what that person who's buying or selling is it needs, so you're not just completely in the dark of what they're asking you. And the best thing is to try to set a realistic thing of, okay, this is what the business can pay. And um
Yeah, and
it,
let's dig
good.
into that junior partnership a lot because we hear that a lot. In our experience is it doesn't usually work out very well. It does sometimes, but and just for your knowledge, a junior partnership would be a situation, and I'm totally making this up, every one of them's different, but over a 5-year period, the employee or the family member buys 10%, then they buy 10%, then they buy 20%, and then they buy 20 and they buy 20, and eventually they own the whole thing. So for a 5-year period, you're kind of partners or you are partners. Well, that sounds good because it's like, oh, over 5 years and I'm easing my way out of the business and there's all these things that sound good. But when you've been an entrepreneur owning 100% of it for 40 years, having a partner gets difficult because now you have to run every decision through with them. And you've got this employee who now went from being an employee to an owner and thinks they can just make every decision because now they're an owner. And so then you start butting heads. And what happens when you don't get along and you still have 4 more years of ownership together before the junior partnership is done? So, partnerships are hard. It takes a certain dynamic between the two to really understand, uh, what each other's role is in the partnership so that they're not, making each other mad all the time. Not that, partners don't disagree, that's fine. But, you don't want to like not understand each other's roles. So we find that just because it was an, employer to employee relationship is much different than partner to partner.
The junior partnership thing is maybe a tool to get that guy who's working for you, the woman, whoever it is, this person who's a key employee to be get some benefit of being a partner. It does allow you the
Yeah.
ability to, like when we go to the SBA to get a loan, now they've already got some experience, and they maybe have a little bit more business acumen now that they've seen the tax returns and the financials at a different level. They're typically, as you know, they're not really that much a part typically of the decision making because they don't hold much power unless their power is that we just have a great relationship. Like there's
Yeah.
not, power. The power isn't on paper, the power is in the relationship.
And yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Yeah, it's in the relationship. And I think that's a really good point. If you're looking to have an employee or a family member be successful in their ownership and be prepared to owner, I mean, I can't stress enough that you start teaching them the business. They need to read financials. They need to, understand gross profit per prescription. They need to, I've been fortunate that, Tim and my dad shared everything with me, so I was able to learn all of this stuff, right? Like I knew it going in, I understood how it all worked. Um, I got to sit in on decisions. That didn't mean that I was making decisions. I saw how the decision got made, and who ultimately made the decision and how that process worked, right? So it really set me up a lot to be able to, and by no means was I perfect when we start owning businesses, and still not. But like I had a higher level of education than most people probably would. And I see all the time that people just think, well, they run the day to day, so they can hop into that. But think about all the stuff you're doing, payroll, you know, tax planning, all these other things. It doesn't mean they need to sit in on every little tiny thing, but giving them some of that business knowledge would, I mean, you agree, Tim, or what? I mean, I don't know how far, and for every person, how far you take that's probably gonna vary, but you can ease them into it, I guess.
I think that's I don't care what responsibility you give. Let's say a junior partner, if it's accounts payable, inventory
Yeah.
management, accounts receivable, um, something that's important that you can that they can then start asking questions. Usually, what you find is that people who don't ask questions really aren't interested. I
Yes.
mean, like what I found is like I've tried to. I think you probably know this, Owen. I mean, your dad wasn't the only one I tried to see if they wanted to be a part of the
Yeah.
ownership team of my pharmacies, and um, you, you know, I've had one partner who I thought she was going to be great, and she's a great person, but she is probably better working in a chain than working. And she didn't work for a chain, frankly. It was a small chain, but she worked for a chain, so she
Mm.
didn't understand the intricacies of, let's say, owning a store. And like you and I can go look at the operating expense of a store, and that makes sense to us just even on the store level
Yeah.
because we've looked at that for so many years. Someone who's, let's say, a pharmacist or a technician or a family member who's never looked at this is just looks like, oh, we made $100,000.
Yeah.
Like, even us who are seasoned at looking at this stuff can overlook something because these are typically in a farm, you're big numbers. You're talking millions of dollars in sales, and then your payroll is $1 million or something like that. It's just it's crazy that if you don't know how the building blocks, how we got to $1 million on these expenses or the sales, then you really don't know the business.
Right. And I think this is a great point. It comes back to, how we're valuing these businesses, right? And first off, if you get a third party, whether it be us or a wholesaler or someone to give you a valuation, um, you get a baseline number. However, if your employee or family member has had no business knowledge, I'll tell you what they're going to do is they're going to see that valuation and go, "Oh my God, how can it be worth $1 million?" Because they don't understand any kind of the business aspects and can't understand that valuation and why it may be correct or incorrect, but um, they need that business knowledge to be comfortable with the valuation. And so what we see a lot of times is they don't know, and then you know they go, oh well, it's not worth that. And we go, oh well, it is worth that, and here's why. And we're teaching them how to do that, but like so often the family member or the employee buying it doesn't think it's worth that. But we also see on the flip side that the sellers think it's worth way more than it actually
Oh,
is.
yeah, always. We always
So
think our stuff is way more.
so having that good business knowledge on both sides allows you to come to something that's realistic. And I think a lot of it comes down to that knowledge, so that people understand these businesses and it'll make for a better deal and a deal actually to happen if that's what
The-
you wanted to do.
when people do buy a family business, Owen, what are there any rules like with the SBA to get financing that are transferable to let's say the son buying out the dad?
Um,
That's yeah, yeah, I know the SBA has so many different requirements for their different models. Like, didn't it used to be that they couldn't stay on and be an owner, but now maybe they could?
oh, yes. So the SBA, well, first off, if you're a family member and own, let's say 10% of it, let's say you're the daughter and you own 10% and dad owns 90, they are now allowing you to buy the rest of that 90, which they didn't used to do
Which made
for
no
some
sense.
odd reason. And then vice versa, they're also allowing you to buy a percentage of the business. Now, that current owner may also have to help guarantee that loan. So there's some downsides to it, but it is an
Right.
option to buy a portion and then buy it out. The other thing that's out there is there's some ways, and it's a bit complicated, but that the the buyer could maybe only put maybe 5% into the purchase price to buy it. So let's say it's $1 million purchase. Well, maybe the buyer only has to come up with 50,000, which is a lot more manageable than 100,000 or 150,000. Um, it takes some cooperation with you and the seller, but there are certainly ways to help do that, and it can be advantageous to the seller because it can delay some tax for you as well. So, uh, there's just a lot of those different things, and it all starts getting, hey, what is the valuation? What does that business start? And then you can start having those conversations on how can we do this? What are my options? Talking to your advisors and et cetera. Yeah, that's a good point, Tim. There's a lot of flexibility in this, and I think there's more options than people think there is um, out there.
And my only thing on all that stuff is that the first thing is for you as the business owners to really figure out, when do I have to start thinking about these transition ideas? It's best to do it when you're healthy. It's best to do it when you don't have to sell. It's best to, the less noise that's going around, the better you can do of thinking about it. Typically, people who are desperate make bad decisions and can become unreasonable with what their goals and stuff are. The great thing I'll tell you, if you got a pharmacy, I mean, it does have a value, like it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like you worked your life and you didn't create something of value. I mean, it's going to have some sort of value. I don't know though if the value is $150,000 or $5 million. It's and unfortunately that value can change.
Right.
Just because I did a valuation on it today doesn't
Yeah.
mean that that's valid for the end of the year. Market conditions can change. If we get a PBM reform thing that actually goes through that messes up this stupid model that we've been operating under for years, I mean, then maybe things will be more reasonable and we'll act like we're like maybe Canada instead, where someone could make money or owning a standard community pharmacy.
Uh, yeah, I mean, and those valuations can change. I mean, a lot, and I think it's good to figure out with your employees or family members whether or not they're gonna buy it at the price that you think it's valued at. Because if they're not going to, then you need to put it on the market because it could take some time to find the right person who will pay you the fair price.
I
Um,
mean, probably the best thing, Owen, like, as I kind of listen to what we're kind of both saying is like when you've got that person you think could be in it is like you talk to them and then you also try to give them some business responsibilities to see if they could have success doing that. They might be a great clinical pharmacist, but they can't they can't manage the payroll
yep.
or they can't manage the inventory or they're terrible at doing the accounts receivable or they're again on the same side they're good at doing the accounts payable. The great thing about doing accounts payable, which I think when your business is smaller, like now, I can do the accounts payable for our two pharmacies. I mean, is that now I know where the money goes. It's not just looking on it as a line item on a P&L or clicking through on the financials of finding what we actually bought. I mean, seeing that physical bill is empowering, and then you can think, well, did I really need that?
Right. And, we do all the time. I mean, that kind of thing is so insightful for someone who's going to try to buy the business. And it also gives them a quick way to understand whether or not it's interesting to them. You take payroll, for example. Most employees think, oh, I'm a pharmacist, $60 an hour, until they see the payroll ledger and realize it's $75 an hour after benefits and payroll
Exactly.
taxes. They don't know that. So, as they start thinking about it and trying to make changes and the really good operators will really get into that and go, hey, what if we did this? Or what if we did this? Or, how about this idea to reduce this expense or to add this line of business or what have you? So, giving them that little bit of access allows you to start understanding whether or not they're actually interested, maybe before you even bring it up uh, as a possibility that they could buy the business.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Parting words, things, other knowledge that you would think someone should know?
No, I think there's obviously a lot into this,
Yeah.
but I think that if you're thinking about doing it, it's time to start having these discussions. So you're prepared. Hopefully you're prepared with your estate, your health plans, your trust. What like hopefully as we get into business, we've got to take the responsibility that we do have for our families.
Yeah.
I mean, our families need us to be a good steward of any investment that we've got. This is an investment not just for you, but for your family. And if there's a successor that could be into it, that's great. And if there's not, I would just say, um, I've been, blessed, that I'm a third generation owner, right? But if one of my kids doesn't get into it, I'm still blessed. It doesn't like we're not the as much definition we put on ourselves of business in our job. Like we've got to be a little bit cautious of putting way too much emphasis on that. Our emphasis really needs to be on what we do and how we do it and how we treat others.
Well, I think that's a good way to end it. Thanks for your time. Again, we did record this. We will put it out on social media, email, our website. We can be reached at independentrxconsulting.com. You can schedule a call right there on our website. Thanks for joining, and we'll have another one here in about a month, so look for the communication. Thanks.
Thanks.